What did your teacher do that should have gotten them fired? I pressed my back against the cold metal of Mr. Peterson's supply closet door, my heart hammering so hard I was sure it would give me away. Through the crack, I watched my chemistry teacher, the man I'd nominated for Teacher of the Year just 3 months ago, count a thick stack of 20s while Madison Blackwell sat across from his desk, perfectly manicured nails drumming impatiently on her designer purse. Same arrangement as last time, Mr. Peterson said, his voice low but clear enough for me to hear every damning word. 2,000 for the AP Chem final answers, delivered 48 hours before the exam. Cash only. Madison rolled her eyes like she was buying a coffee, not academic fraud that would secure her valedictorian status. Whatever. Daddy already transferred the money to my account. Just make sure the answers are right this time. I can't afford another B+. Can't afford a B+. I almost choked on the irony. Here I was, hiding in a supply closet at 7:30 p.m. because I'd forgotten my lab notebook, and I stumbled onto this. I'd been busting my ass in Peterson's class since September, staying after school 3 times a week for extra help, watching YouTube tutorials until midnight, and still barely scraping by with a C+. Meanwhile, Madison, who I'd never seen take a single note, was buying her way to Harvard. The test bank answers are always accurate, Peterson replied, rubber banding the cash. Though I do appreciate your father's generous donation to the Academic Excellence Fund. Academic Excellence Fund. Jesus Christ. I watched him slide the money into his briefcase like this was just another Tuesday night transaction. How many times had he done this? How many students had paid their way past me while I actually tried to learn the difference between ionic and covalent bonds? Same time Friday for the makeup exam answers. Madison asked, standing up and smoothing down her skirt. Trevor's parents want to make sure he can retake it once more before semester grades are final. Trevor Martinez. Another honor roll regular who somehow aced every test despite sleeping through half the lectures. It was all clicking into place like a chemical equation I'd finally solved, except this one made me sick to my stomach. Friday works, Peterson nodded. Though the price goes up to $2,500. Supply and demand, you understand. Madison shrugged like an extra $500 was lunch money. Fine. Daddy says whatever it takes to keep my GPA above 4.0. I held my breath as she gathered her things, designer heels clicking toward the door. The moment she left, Peterson pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly. Probably scheduling his next tutoring session with another wealthy student whose parents could afford to buy their kid's future. $2,500. That was more than my mom made in a month at the diner. More than our rent. And these kids were dropping it like pocket change to steal opportunities from students like me, students who actually gave a damn about learning. I waited until Peterson locked up and left before I finally crept out of that closet, my lab notebook forgotten in my sweaty palm. As I walked through the empty hallways, past the Excellence in Education banners and college prep posters, one thought burned through my mind: I had to expose this. Not just for me, but for every kid who'd been robbed by Peterson's corruption. The man I trusted with my academic future had been systematically destroying it. But now I had something he didn't expect. I had the truth. The next morning, I sat in Peterson's first period class trying to act normal while my world had completely shifted. Every time he smiled at a student or wrote equations on the board, all I could see was him counting that stack of 20s. When he handed back our latest quiz, another C+ for me, perfect scores for Madison and Trevor, I had to grip my pencil so hard it nearly snapped. Excellent work as always, Madison, Peterson said, placing her paper face down on her desk with a knowing smile. Your understanding of molecular structures continues to impress me. Madison barely looked up from her phone. She didn't even pretend to care about the subject she was supposedly excelling in. After class, I lingered behind, pretending to organize my backpack while the room emptied. Peterson noticed me struggling with my quiz grade, probably thought I was going to ask for extra credit like the desperate student he'd pegged me as. Don't look so discouraged, he said, erasing the whiteboard. Chemistry is challenging. Not everyone has a natural aptitude for it. Natural aptitude. Right. Mr. Peterson, I've been wondering, do you offer private tutoring? I know some students seem to really improve their scores with extra help. His hand paused mid-erase. Private tutoring can be quite expensive. Most families find the regular after-school session sufficient. What if cost wasn't an issue? I pressed, watching his reaction carefully. Like, what would something like that run? Peterson set down the eraser and turned to face me fully. For a moment, his friendly teacher mask slipped, and I saw something calculating in his eyes. Well, that would depend on the level of intensive support a student required. Comprehensive test preparation, for instance, requires significant resources. My stomach dropped. He was actually considering it. Testing whether I was trying to buy my way in or just asking innocent questions. I see, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Maybe I'll stick with the regular sessions for now. Probably for the best, he replied, that fake warmth sliding back into place. Though if your circumstances change, we can always discuss alternative arrangements. Alternative arrangements. The euphemisms made it worse somehow. I spent lunch period in the library, researching academic fraud policies on my laptop. What I found made my blood run cold. If Peterson had been manipulating grades and test scores, it wasn't just about money, it was about college admissions, scholarship eligibility, class rankings. Students like Madison weren't just buying better grades, they were buying futures that should have belonged to kids who'd actually earned them. I pulled up my transcript on the student portal. 3 semesters of Peterson's classes. 3 semesters of C's and B minuses while I watched wealthy classmates coast to honor roll. My cumulative GPA, 3.4. Not terrible, but not competitive for the state university scholarships I'd been banking on. Madison's GPA, according to the honor roll postings, 4.2. Then I did something that made me feel sick but absolutely necessary. I looked up the scholarship cutoffs for state schools. Merit aid started at 3.8. Full ride academic scholarships required 4.0 or higher. Peterson hadn't just been stealing my money's worth of education. He'd been stealing my future. I closed the laptop and stared out the library windows at the student parking lot, where Madison's BMW sat next to Trevor's lifted truck. Vehicles that cost more than most people's houses, owned by kids who'd never worked for anything in their lives. But I had something they didn't, nothing left to lose. And Mr. Peterson was about to find out exactly how dangerous that made me. That afternoon, I made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. I was going to get proof. I started small, documenting everything I could remember from the night before. Madison Blackwell, $2,000 for AP Chem final answers. Trevor Martinez, makeup exam, Friday, $2,500. I wrote it all down in a composition notebook I bought specifically for this, dating every entry and keeping it locked in my bedroom desk. But I needed more than my word against Peterson's. I needed evidence. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Thursday after school, I was in the chemistry lab finishing a makeup experiment when I overheard Peterson on the phone in his office. The door was cracked open, and his voice carried clearly across the empty classroom. "No, Mrs. Chen, I understand your concerns about Kevin's performance, but additional tutoring sessions are quite expensive. We're talking about comprehensive test preparation that requires specialized materials." I froze, my hand still on the beaker I'd been cleaning. Kevin Chen was in my third period class, quiet kid, worked part-time at his family's restaurant, grades hovering around the same level as mine. The investment would be substantial, Peterson continued. $3,000 for the remaining semester, including final exam preparation. I know it's steep, but Kevin's future is worth it, don't you think? $3,000. They were raising the prices. I heard Peterson's chair creak, footsteps moving toward the door. Panicking, I fumbled for my phone and hit record just as his voice got clearer. "I have other families willing to pay for that level of academic support, Mrs. Chen. If Kevin's serious about getting into Berkeley, this is what it takes in today's competitive environment. Supply and demand, I'm afraid." The recording was only 30 seconds, but it was something. Peterson's voice clearly discussing payment for test preparation and mentioning specific dollar amounts. It wasn't the smoking gun I needed, but it was a start. Over the next few days, I became a detective in my own school. I started paying attention to patterns I'd never noticed before. Madison, Trevor, and about 6 other students always seemed to know exactly what would be on tests. They'd make casual comments beforehand, "Make sure you study molecular geometry extra hard," or "I bet there's going to be a lot of thermodynamics questions," that seemed like lucky guesses until you realized they were right every single time. I also noticed they all had one thing in common: expensive cars, designer clothes, and parents who donated generously to school fundraisers. The kind of families who could drop thousands of dollars without blinking. Meanwhile, students like Kevin Chen, Maria Santos, and David Kim, kids who actually studied but whose families worked paycheck to paycheck, struggled with the same grades I did. We were the ones staying after school for help, forming study groups, actually reading the textbook. And we were the ones getting left behind. The breaking point came Friday afternoon. I was walking past Peterson's classroom when I saw Kevin Chen leaving, looking defeated. His eyes were red, and he was clutching a test paper marked with a bright red D+. "Rough day?" I asked, catching up to him in the hallway. Kevin shook his head bitterly. "I don't get it, man. I studied for 3 weeks. Made flashcards, did every practice problem, even got my sister to quiz me. And I still bombed it." "What did Peterson say when you asked for help?" "Same thing he always says. I can get extra tutoring, but..." Kevin trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "But what?" "Nothing. Forget it." He stuffed the test into his backpack and hurried away. But I knew what he couldn't bring himself to say. Peterson had quoted him the same price he'd quoted Kevin's mom on the phone. $3,000 Kevin's family didn't have. That night, I sat in my room staring at my notebook full of evidence that still wasn't quite enough. I had observations, one partial recording, and a growing list of students whose grades mysteriously improved after their families' donations increased. What I needed was to catch Peterson in the act again. And I had a feeling Friday night's makeup exam session with Trevor Martinez was going to give me exactly that chance. The only question was whether I had the guts to go through with it. Friday night, I parked 3 blocks from school and walked through the darkness, my phone fully charged and my hands shaking with nervous energy. I told my mom I was studying at the library until 9, not technically a lie, since I was definitely going to learn something tonight. The school felt different after hours. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows down empty hallways, and every footstep echoed like a gunshot. I made my way to the chemistry wing, my heart pounding so loud I was sure security would hear it from the parking lot. Peterson's classroom was dark, but I could see light spilling from under his office door. I crept closer, staying low beneath the windows, and positioned myself behind the lab bench closest to his office. From there, I had a clear view through the gap in his blinds and could hear conversations clearly. At exactly 7:15, Trevor Martinez strolled in like he owned the place. Even at night, he looked like he'd stepped out of a prep school catalog, khakis pressed, polo shirt pristine, confidence radiating from every pore. "Got the cash," Trevor announced, dropping a thick envelope on Peterson's desk. "Dad says to make it quick. He's got a conference call with Tokyo in an hour." Peterson opened the envelope and fanned through the bills. $2,500, as agreed. "The makeup exam is Monday, correct?" "Yeah, and I need to nail it. My acceptance to Stanford is conditional on maintaining my GPA." Trevor flopped into the chair across from Peterson's desk. "Plus, Mom's already ordered the Stanford Mom car decals." I fumbled for my phone, hands trembling as I started recording. The angle was perfect, I could see both their faces clearly through the window, and my phone picked up every word. "Here's Monday's exam," Peterson said, sliding a packet across the desk. "Complete answer key is attached. Study it over the weekend, but don't make it too obvious. Miss a few of the harder problems, get around a 92%. Trevor flipped through the papers casually. "What about the other students taking the makeup? Won't they notice if I'm the only one who aces it?" "Don't worry about David Kim and Maria Santos," Peterson replied. "They'll be taking a different version." My blood turned to ice. Different versions. He was actively sabotaging the students who couldn't pay while handing answers to those who could. This wasn't just corruption, it was systematic destruction of kids' futures. "Smart," Trevor nodded. Hey, my cousin Jake is failing your third period class. His dad's willing to pay for the same arrangement. Can you hook him up? Of course. Same rates apply. Though prices increased to $3,000 after winter break, demand is higher second semester with AP exams approaching. $3,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. Peterson was running a full-scale operation, and he was getting greedier. Trevor stood up, pocketing the exam papers like they were baseball cards. Pleasure doing business. Oh, and my dad wanted me to tell you, he's recommending you for that District Teacher of Excellence award. Figured you deserve some recognition for all your extra efforts. They shook hands, and I wanted to throw up. Peterson was going to get an award for being an excellent teacher while he systematically cheated students like me out of our futures. After Trevor left, I watched Peterson update what looked like a spreadsheet on his computer. A client list, probably. How many names were on there? How long had this been going on? I stayed hidden until Peterson locked up and left, then slipped out through the side exit. In the parking lot, I checked my phone recording. 8 minutes of crystal clear footage showing money changing hands, test answers being sold, and Peterson discussing his expanding fraud operation. But as I walked back to my car, a terrifying realization hit me. If Peterson had this many wealthy families paying him, he also had that many powerful people who would want to protect him. Parents who paid thousands to secure their kids' futures weren't going to let some scholarship kid from the wrong side of town destroy that investment. I wasn't just fighting Peterson anymore. I was about to go to war with half the school board's biggest donors. And they had no idea what was coming. Saturday morning, I sat in my car outside Riverside Diner where my mom worked the weekend shift, staring at the 8-minute video on my phone. I'd watched it 12 times already, and each viewing made Peterson's betrayal cut deeper. But now I faced a problem I hadn't anticipated. I was terrified to move forward. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom. Asterisk table 6 left you a $20 tip when they heard you got into State's Honors Program. People believe in you, baby, asterisk. Except I hadn't gotten into State's Honors Program. My 3.4 GPA had put me on the waiting list while students like Madison sailed through with their purchased 4.2s. That $20 represented someone's faith in me, faith built on a lie Peterson had helped create. I pocketed the phone and walked into the diner. Mom looked exhausted, her graying hair escaping from her ponytail as she balanced 3 plates on one arm. She'd been pulling double shifts since Dad left, trying to save enough for my college fund. Every dollar she scraped together felt heavier now, knowing Peterson had been systematically ensuring it wouldn't matter. Hey, sweetheart, she said, sliding a coffee across the counter. You're up early for a Saturday. Couldn't sleep. I stirred sugar into the coffee I didn't want. Mom, what would you do if you found out someone was cheating? Like, really cheating, in a way that hurt other people? She paused, coffee pot in hand. That's awfully specific. Everything okay at school? Before I could answer, the bell above the door chimed, and my stomach dropped. Madison Blackwell walked in with her mother, Mrs. Blackwell, school board president and owner of half the commercial real estate in town. They took a booth by the window, and I watched my mom straighten her shoulders the way she did when serving customers who made her feel small. I should get back to work, Mom whispered. But honey, sometimes doing the right thing costs more than doing nothing. You just have to decide if you can live with staying quiet. I watched her approach the Blackwell's table with forced cheerfulness while Madison scrolled through her phone, probably scheduling her next academic purchase. Mrs. Blackwell barely looked up when Mom took their order, treating her like furniture with a notepad. The usual? Mom asked. Actually, Mrs. Blackwell said, finally glancing up, I hear congratulations are in order for your daughter. Madison mentioned she's doing exceptionally well in Mr. Peterson's advanced classes. My mom's face lit up. Thank you. She's been working so hard. Mr. Peterson has been wonderful, really going above and beyond to help her succeed. Madison smirked at her phone, and I realized what was happening. Mrs. Blackwell wasn't being nice, she was fishing for information. Seeing if I'd said anything about Peterson's side business. Such a dedicated teacher, Mrs. Blackwell continued. We're so fortunate to have educators who provide that extra level of support for motivated students. Extra level of support. The euphemism made my skin crawl. After they left, Mom returned with confusion written across her face. Strange conversation. Mrs. Blackwell seemed very interested in your chemistry class. Yeah, I managed. Strange. But it wasn't strange at all. Word was getting out that someone had been asking questions about Peterson's tutoring. They were probing, trying to figure out what I knew and whether I posed a threat to their system. I excused myself and stepped outside, pulling out my phone to call the one person I trusted to help me figure out what to do next, my older brother Marcus, who graduated 3 years ago and now worked as a paralegal downtown. You're sure about what you saw? Marcus asked after I'd explained everything. I've got video evidence. Jesus, little sister. You realize what you're up against. Mrs. Blackwell basically runs this town. Peterson probably has a dozen families protecting him, all with serious money and political connections. So I should just let him keep destroying kids' futures. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. No. But you need to be smart about this. You can't just walk into the principal's office with your phone. They'll close ranks, destroy the evidence, and make you look like a disgruntled student with an axe to grind. Then what do? You need an ally. Someone with credibility they can't dismiss. And you need more evidence, enough that they can't sweep it under the rug even if they want to. As I hung up, I realized Marcus was right. But I also realized something else. Mrs. Blackwell's fishing expedition meant they were already worried. Which meant I had more power than I'd thought. The question was whether I was brave enough to use it. Sunday night, I made a decision that felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. If Peterson's wealthy clients were already suspicious, I needed to move fast before they had time to warn him or destroy evidence. But Marcus was right, I needed an ally with credibility. That ally turned out to be someone I'd never expected, Mrs. Rodriguez, the school librarian. I'd always liked Mrs. Rodriguez. She'd helped me research scholarship applications, stayed late to let me use the computer lab, and never made me feel ashamed about checking out SAT prep books instead of buying them. What I didn't know was that she'd been watching Peterson's grade patterns for months. I was wondering when someone would finally notice, she said quietly when I approached her desk Monday morning before first period. I've been tracking honor roll statistics for the past 3 years. The correlation between family donations and sudden grade improvements in certain classes has been troubling. My heart nearly stopped. You knew. I suspected. But suspicion isn't proof. She glanced around the empty library, then leaned closer. What kind of evidence are we talking about? I showed her the video on my phone, watching her expression harden as Peterson's voice filled her earbuds. When it finished, she removed them slowly and stared at me with something between admiration and terror. This is explosive, she whispered. But also dangerous. Do you understand what you're risking? Peterson has been here 12 years. He's popular with parents, respected by administration. They're not going to want to believe this. So you think I should stay quiet? Mrs. Rodriguez pulled up a spreadsheet on her computer, one she'd apparently been building for months. Look at this data. In Peterson's classes, students from families who donate more than $5,000 annually to the school foundation have an average GPA of 3.9. Students from families who donate less than $500 average 2.7. In other teachers' classes, the gap is negligible. The numbers hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just a few wealthy students buying grades, it was systematic economic segregation disguised as academic achievement. There's more, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. I cross-referenced Peterson's grade distributions with college acceptance rates. Students in his high-achieving category are getting into universities they shouldn't qualify for based on their performance in other subjects. Meanwhile, genuinely talented students like you are being shut out of opportunities they've earned. She pulled up another document, a list of names I recognized. Kevin Chen, Maria Santos, David Kim, me. All students who'd been denied academic scholarships despite strong performances in every class except Peterson's. How many kids? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Conservative estimate. Over the past 3 years, at least 30 students have had their college prospects artificially deflated while another 20 bought their way to honor roll. Her voice carried anger I'd never heard from her before. That's 30 futures stolen and 20 undeserved acceptances to competitive programs. 30 futures. 30 kids like me who'd worked twice as hard for half the recognition while wealthy classmates paid Peterson for success they'd never earned. The scope of it was overwhelming. What do we do? I asked. Mrs. Rodriguez closed the spreadsheets and looked directly at me. We build a case so airtight that even the school board can't ignore it. But I need to warn you, once we start this process, there's no going back. Peterson's clients include some very powerful families. They will fight dirty to protect their investments. As if summoned by her words, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, asterisk some things are better left alone. Smart kids know when to focus on their own futures, asterisk. Mrs. Rodriguez saw my face change. What is it? I showed her the message, and her expression went grim. It's already starting. They know you're a threat. But instead of scaring me, the anonymous threat did something unexpected. It made me furious. These people had bought their way to the top by stepping on kids like me, and now they had the audacity to threaten me for fighting back. When do we start? I asked. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. That afternoon, Mrs. Rodriguez and I met in the library archives room, a windowless storage area where she kept old yearbooks and damaged books. It felt appropriately clandestine for planning the downfall of Riverside High's most beloved chemistry teacher. Before we go any further, you need to understand the timeline, Mrs. Rodriguez said, spreading documents across the metal table. Semester grades are submitted in 3 weeks. If Peterson realizes we're onto him, he could manipulate final grades to cover his tracks or make you and the other affected students look like we're just bitter about poor performance. She was right. Peterson held all our academic futures in his hands, and cornering him could backfire spectacularly. There's something else, I said, pulling out my phone to show her 2 more threatening texts I'd received during lunch. Asterisk your mom works hard at that diner. Would hate to see her lose regular customers, asterisk and worse, asterisk state university reviews applications holistically. Character matters as much as grades, asterisk. Mrs. Rodriguez's face darkened. They're threatening your family and your college prospects. This confirms we're dealing with people who have serious influence. She paused, studying the messages. But they're also getting desperate. People don't make threats unless they're scared. How do you know so much about this kind of thing? My husband's an investigative journalist, she said quietly. I've seen how corruption works when powerful people feel threatened. The fact that they're trying to intimidate you means your evidence is more dangerous than they'd like. Over the next hour, we outlined our strategy. Mrs. Rodriguez would discreetly contact parents of students she suspected had been affected by Peterson's grade manipulation. Meanwhile, I would try to record more evidence of his operation, but safely, without taking risks that could get me expelled or worse. We need at least 3 more documented transactions, she explained. One incident could be dismissed as a misunderstanding. A pattern becomes undeniable. As we were packing up, Mrs. Rodriguez handed me a small digital recorder. If you're going to do this, do it right. Better audio quality than your phone, and it's less obvious. I was slipping the device into my backpack when my phone rang. Kevin Chen's name appeared on the screen, and my stomach immediately nodded. Hey, Kevin's voice was strained when I answered. Can you meet me in the east parking lot? I need to talk to you about something. What's wrong? Just, please. It's important. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Go. But be careful. And remember, record everything. I found Kevin sitting on the hood of his beat-up Honda, staring at a crumpled test paper in his hands. When he saw me approaching, he held up the paper, another D+, this one from today's quiz on organic compounds. I know what Peterson's doing, he said without preamble. My mom told me about the phone call. $3,000 for test answers and grade changes. My heart stopped. Kevin. My family's been saving for 2 years to afford it, he continued, his voice hollow. Mom's been working double shifts at the restaurant, Dad took a weekend job cleaning offices. They think it's their fault I'm struggling, like they're failing me by not being able to afford Peterson's extra tutoring. I sat down next to him on the hood, processing what he was saying. You're not going to pay him, right? Kevin laughed bitterly. With what? Even if we had $3,000, I couldn't live with myself knowing I bought grades while other kids actually earned theirs. He looked at me directly. But here's the thing, I know you've been asking questions about Peterson. Madison Blackwell's been telling people you're stirring up trouble about grades and fairness. Kevin, I want to help. He pulled out his phone and showed me a recording app. My mom's calling Peterson tomorrow to officially decline his tutoring offer. I'm going to record the conversation. If he says anything incriminating about the payment scheme or mentions other students who have paid, we'll have him. The plan was brilliant and terrifying. Kevin's family rejecting Peterson's offer might prompt him to reveal more about his operation, especially if he thought he was losing potential income. That's really dangerous, I said. If Peterson figures out your recording. Then we're both screwed anyway, Kevin interrupted. Look, my parents came to this country with nothing. They've worked their asses off to give me opportunities they never had. I'm not going to let some corrupt teacher destroy that just because we can't afford to play his game. As we sat there planning Peterson's downfall, my phone buzzed with another unknown number, * final warning. Drop this, or everyone you care about pays the price, *. I showed Kevin the message, and his jaw tightened. They're threatening you too. My mom, my college applications, probably anything else they can think of. Kevin stood up from the car, determination replacing the defeat I'd seen in his eyes all semester. Then we better make sure we get them before they get us. Tuesday morning, Kevin's recording plan hit its first snag when his mom called in sick to work, food poisoning from the restaurant's walk-in cooler malfunctioning overnight. Our carefully timed phone call to Peterson would have to wait, but as it turned out, the delay gave us something even better. During third period, I was pretending to focus on Peterson's lecture about chemical equilibrium when my phone vibrated with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez, * emergency. Library archives. Now, *. I asked for a bathroom pass and hurried to meet her, finding her pacing among the dusty storage boxes with her laptop open. I've been contacted by other parents, she said without preamble. Word is spreading that someone's investigating Peterson's grading practices. 3 families reached out overnight, all with kids who've been struggling in his classes despite strong performance elsewhere. She turned her laptop toward me, showing a list of names and details that made my blood run cold. Sarah Chen, Kevin's sister, graduated 2019, parents paid $1,800 for final exam answers senior year. Marcus Webb, current sophomore, family quoted $2,200 for semester grade adjustment. Jennifer Santos, Maria's older sister, graduated 2020, parents borrowed money to pay Peterson $1,500. This goes back at least 4 years, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. And here's the worst part, Jennifer Santos lost her scholarship to state because her Peterson grades kept her GPA below the cutoff. Her parents paid him $1,500 they couldn't afford, and he still sabotaged her future. I stared at Jennifer's name, remembering Maria's sister, brilliant girl who tutored me in algebra freshman year. She'd ended up at community college instead of state, and I'd always wondered why. There's more, Mrs. Rodriguez said grimly. 2 of the parents who contacted me mentioned something about a insurance policy Peterson supposedly keeps. Documentation of all his transactions, including which families paid and when. Why would he keep records of his own crimes? Protection, she said. If any of these wealthy families tried to expose him or throw him under the bus, he'd have evidence of their participation. Mutually assured destruction. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin, * mom's feeling better. Making the call in an hour. Peterson's expecting it at 2:30 *. I showed Mrs. Rodriguez the message, and she checked her watch, 1:45 p.m. Perfect timing, she said. While Kevin's mom is on the phone with Peterson, I need you to do something that might sound crazy. More crazy than hiding in supply closets and secretly recording teachers. I need you to get into Peterson's classroom during the call. If he really keeps insurance files, they're probably in his office. While he's distracted talking to Mrs. Chen, you could look for evidence of his record keeping. The idea terrified me. Breaking into Peterson's office was a massive escalation. If I got caught, it wouldn't just be about secret recordings anymore. It would be criminal. Mrs. Rodriguez, I can't. Peterson's next class isn't until 3:15, she interrupted. He always takes parent calls in the faculty lounge because his office phone has a dead battery. You'd have maybe 20 minutes. 20 minutes to find evidence that could expose years of corruption. 20 minutes that could restore stolen futures and prevent Peterson from destroying more kids' dreams. But also 20 minutes that could end my academic career if anything went wrong. I'll create a distraction, Mrs. Rodriguez added. Call him to the main office right after his phone conversation ends. Buy you extra time to get out safely. I looked at the list of Peterson's victims, kids whose families had been exploited, whose futures had been stolen or sold. Kevin's sister. Maria's sister. How many others we hadn't found yet? Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. But if this goes wrong. It won't, Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. We're going to end this. At 2:25 p.m., I positioned myself in the empty hallway outside Peterson's classroom, heart hammering as I waited for Kevin's signal that the phone call had begun. At 2:32, my phone buzzed with Kevin's text, * call started. He's in faculty lounge, *. I slipped into Peterson's classroom, my hands trembling as I approached his office door. To my surprise, it was unlocked, probably because he never expected a student to be bold enough to break in during school hours. The office was smaller than it looked from the supply closet, cramped with filing cabinets and stacks of papers. I started with his desk, carefully searching through drawers while listening for footsteps in the hallway. The top drawer held typical teacher supplies, but the bottom drawer was locked. My phone showed 2:35. Kevin's mom was probably explaining their financial situation right now, buying me precious minutes while Peterson tried to convince her to find the money somehow. I moved to the filing cabinet, scanning folder labels, AP Chemistry 2021, Lab Safety, grade books. Then I saw it, a folder marked, Private Tutoring, tucked behind the others. My hands shook as I pulled it out. Inside were photocopied records that made me sick. A spreadsheet listing student names, payment amounts, and dates going back 5 years. Madison Blackwell, $8,000 total over 3 semesters. Trevor Martinez, $6,500. At least 20 other names, including some I recognized as recent graduates who'd gotten into Ivy League schools. But the worst part was the second page, a list titled Payment Plans, with families' financial information. Peterson had researched how much each family could afford and priced his services accordingly. The Blackwells paid $3,000 per transaction. Working-class families were quoted $1,200 to $1,500, amounts that would devastate their budgets but still seem reasonable compared to college tuition. I photographed everything with my phone, trying to capture each page clearly while my hands shook with adrenaline. As I flipped through more documents, I found something even more damning, email printouts showing Peterson coordinating with other teachers. From peterson.chemistry@riverside.edu to williams.english@riverside.edu. Subject, grade adjustment, Trevor Martinez. Asterisk Sarah, need a small favor for the Martinez family. Trevor's struggling with the essay requirements in your AP English class. His parents have been very supportive of our academic excellence initiatives. Could you review his semester grade? I'm sure there's room for improvement with extra consideration, asterisk. Mrs. Williams had responded positively, bumping Trevor's grade from B- to A-. The corruption went beyond Peterson. He was coordinating with other teachers, spreading his network of fraud throughout the school. My phone showed 241. I photographed the emails frantically, then kept searching. In the very back of the folder, I found Peterson's insurance policy, a detailed record of every family who'd paid him, including bank transaction numbers and even photocopies of some checks. One entry made me stop breathing, asterisk Blackwell donation, $15,000 to chemistry lab equipment fund. Agreement, Madison's grades maintained above 4.0 through graduation. If arrangement discovered, family donation was voluntary and unrelated to academic performance, asterisk. They weren't just buying individual grades anymore. The biggest donors had purchased guaranteed GPAs through graduation, with built-in cover stories in case they got caught. At 2:44, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Panic shot through me as I quickly returned the folder to its hiding place, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. The footsteps passed by, but I realized I was running out of time. As I prepared to leave, I noticed Peterson's computer was still logged in, screen showing his email inbox. Without thinking, I scrolled through recent messages and found one that made my blood turn to ice. From blackwell.development@riverside.net to peterson.chemistry@riverside.edu. Subject, problem student. Asterisk Tom, we need to discuss the student asking questions about tutoring arrangements. This situation requires immediate attention before it escalates. Call me tonight, asterisk. They knew it was me. Peterson and Mrs. Blackwell were actively planning how to handle my investigation. My phone buzzed with Kevin's text, asterisk call ending. Get out now, asterisk. I grabbed my phone and bolted from the office, slipping out of the classroom just as I heard Peterson's voice echoing down the hallway. As I hurried toward my locker, trying to look casual, one terrifying thought consumed me. I had the evidence to destroy Peterson's operation, but now they knew exactly who was coming for them. Wednesday morning, I woke up to find my car windshield covered in what looked like maple syrup, sticky, impossible to clean, and clearly not an accident. The message was obvious: we know where you live, we know what you drive, and this is just the beginning. My hands shook as I scraped the mess off with a plastic scraper, trying not to think about how someone had stood in my driveway at 3 a.m., close enough to touch my mom's bedroom window. The anonymous threats were escalating into real-world intimidation. Vandalism, my mom asked, watching from the front porch with her coffee mug clutched tight. Probably just kids, I lied, not wanting to drag her deeper into Peterson's web of retaliation. But the look in her eyes told me she didn't believe it either. At school, the atmosphere felt electric with tension. Kevin met me at my locker with dark circles under his eyes and news that made my stomach drop. Peterson called my mom back last night, he whispered, glancing around nervously. Offered her a payment plan for his tutoring services. $1,500 down, then $300 a month until graduation. When she said we still couldn't afford it, he got weird. Weird how? Started asking questions about our family. Whether my dad's restaurant license was up to date, if we'd had any health department inspections lately. Like he was fishing for pressure points. Kevin pulled out his phone, showing me a recording from his mom's second conversation with Peterson. His voice came through clearly, asterisk, Mrs. Chen, I'd hate to see Kevin's struggles in chemistry affect his college prospects. Sometimes families find creative ways to prioritize their children's futures. Perhaps you could discuss it with some of our other parents. The Martinez family faced similar budget constraints last year but found the investment worthwhile. Asterisk. He's trying to build a network, I realized. Get families to pressure each other into paying him. It gets worse, Kevin continued. My cousin Jake, Trevor's friend who Peterson mentioned Friday night, apparently his dad already made the first payment. $3,000 for guaranteed B+ or higher through graduation. The scope of Peterson's operation kept expanding. This wasn't just about test answers anymore, he was selling multi-year academic insurance policies to families willing to pay for guaranteed grades. During lunch period, Mrs. Rodriguez pulled me aside with an expression that mixed excitement and terror. We've had a breakthrough, but it's complicated things significantly. She led me to the library archives, where her laptop displayed an email that made my heart race. From whistleblower2021@protonmail.com to rodriguez.library@riverside.edu. Subject, Peterson investigation. Asterisk I heard through parent networks that someone is finally investigating Peterson's grade manipulation. I'm a Riverside graduate, 2018, whose family paid Peterson $4,000 my senior year. I have bank records, text messages, and email evidence. But I'm scared to come forward because my younger sister is currently in Peterson's AP class. If I expose him, he could retaliate against her grades. Can we coordinate our evidence while protecting current students? Asterisk. This is exactly what we needed, Mrs. Rodriguez said. A graduate with documentation who's willing to testify. But look at the timestamp, this email came in at 2:47 a.m. Someone's losing sleep over Peterson's threats. She scrolled down to show me more details the anonymous graduate had provided. Peterson keeps backup files on a personal laptop he brings to school. Password protected, but stored in his car during classes because he's paranoid about IT monitoring school computers. Gray Toyota Camry, faculty parking spot 12. My pulse quickened. Peterson's personal laptop would contain evidence that school IT couldn't accidentally discover or delete. But accessing a car in the faculty parking lot during school hours would be nearly impossible without getting caught. There's something else, Mrs. Rodriguez added grimly. I received a visit from Vice Principal Morrison this morning. Apparently, there have been concerns raised about my mentoring relationship with struggling students. Someone complained that I'm spending too much time helping kids research college scholarships instead of focusing on library duties. The message was clear, they were coming for Mrs. Rodriguez too. Peterson's network was trying to isolate me by removing my only adult ally. They're getting desperate, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Yes, but desperate people do desperate things. Mrs. Rodriguez closed her laptop and looked at me seriously. I think it's time we contacted someone outside the school. My husband's newspaper would be very interested in a story about systematic academic fraud in the district's flagship high school. As she spoke, my phone buzzed with a text that made my blood freeze. Asterisk, your chemistry quiz tomorrow has some very difficult questions. Would hate to see you fail when you're so close to graduation. Asterisk. Peterson was threatening to sabotage my grades directly now. And with college applications due in 2 weeks, one failed quiz in his class could destroy everything I'd worked for. The war had officially begun. Thursday morning, I walked into Peterson's classroom knowing he was planning to destroy my grade, but I wasn't prepared for how boldly he'd do it. The quiz he handed out bore no resemblance to anything we'd studied, advanced organic chemistry concepts that wouldn't normally appear until college-level courses. You have 30 minutes, Peterson announced, his eyes lingering on me with unmistakable satisfaction. This material should be familiar if you've been keeping up with the assigned reading. I stared at the first question about protein folding mechanisms and felt my scholarship dreams crumbling in real time. Around me, Madison and Trevor exchanged knowing glances while scribbling confident answers. They'd obviously been given the real quiz ahead of time, while I got the impossible version designed to tank my GPA. But Peterson made a critical mistake. He was so focused on destroying my grade that he forgot Kevin was also in this class. I caught Kevin's eye and saw him staring at his own quiz in confusion. His paper looked different from mine, but also different from what the paying students had received. Peterson was juggling multiple versions, and the logistics were starting to show cracks. After class, Kevin and I compared papers in the hallway. His quiz covered material we'd actually studied, just at an impossibly advanced level. Mine was pure sabotage, questions pulled from university textbooks that no high school student could reasonably answer. He's not even trying to hide it anymore, Kevin said, photographing both our quizzes with his phone. Look at the question numbering, yours goes 1, 3, 5, 7. Mine goes 1, 2, 4, 6. He literally printed different exams and mixed up the page order. The sloppiness was actually encouraging. Peterson was rattled enough to make obvious mistakes, which meant our investigation was having an impact. But it also meant he was getting reckless, which made him more dangerous. During study hall, Mrs. Rodriguez intercepted me with urgent news. The anonymous graduate contacted me again. She's willing to meet this afternoon, off campus, at the Riverside Community Center. She has 5 years' worth of evidence and wants to coordinate with us before Peterson realizes how much documentation exists. What changed her mind? Her sister came home crying yesterday. Peterson told her she was falling behind and suggested the family consider his tutoring services. Same pattern, new generation. Mrs. Rodriguez's voice carried barely controlled anger. This girl watched her family sacrifice everything to pay Peterson once, and now he's targeting her little sister. The meeting was set for 4:30 p.m., after both our schedules cleared. But as we finalized plans, my phone rang with a call that made my stomach drop, Mom's contact from the diner. Sweetheart, I need you to come pick me up. Mom's voice was strained, trying to sound calm. I've been let go. Something about customer complaints and attitude problems with prominent families. I closed my eyes, knowing exactly which prominent families had complained. Peterson's network was targeting my mom's job now, hitting us where it would hurt most, our family's only income source. I'll be right there, I managed, my voice cracking. Mrs. Rodriguez overheard and put a protective hand on my shoulder. This confirms everything. They're not just protecting Peterson anymore, they're actively trying to destroy anyone who threatens their system. As I gathered my things to leave, she grabbed my arm. The meeting with our graduate witness is more crucial now. If we're going to expose this, it has to be soon, before they can cause more damage to innocent families. Walking toward the parking lot, I felt the weight of what we were up against. Peterson and his clients weren't just defending academic fraud, they were willing to destroy lives to protect their investment. My mom was collateral damage in a war I'd started. But seeing Mom's defeated expression when I picked her up only strengthened my resolve. These people had just made it personal in a way they'd regret. Thursday at 4:30 p.m., I sat in the empty community center meeting room watching a young woman with tired eyes spread bank statements across the table like evidence in a murder trial. Sarah Martinez, Trevor's older cousin, class of 2018, had driven 2 hours from State University to meet with us, and the documentation she brought made my hands shake. $4,000 over 6 months, she said quietly, pointing to highlighted transactions on her father's business account. Dad liquidated his equipment fund to pay Peterson. Told everyone the restaurant was upgrading, but really he was buying my chemistry grade so I could keep my pre-med track. Mrs. Rodriguez leaned forward, studying the bank records. These deposits correspond exactly with your grade improvements. B- to A- after the first payment, then straight A's once the arrangement was established. I didn't know until last month, Sarah continued, her voice heavy with guilt. I thought I was finally understanding chemistry. Peterson made me believe I was having breakthrough moments, that his teaching style just clicked for me. She laughed bitterly. Turns out my breakthrough cost my dad his retirement savings. I watched her flip through printed emails between Peterson and her father, negotiations that read like business contracts. Peterson had even provided academic progress reports to justify the payments, detailed analyses of Sarah's supposed improvement that were completely fabricated. Here's what really pisses me off, Sarah said, pulling out her phone to show us Peterson's recent text to her dad. Sarah's sister Maria seems to be struggling with the same concepts. Family discount available, $2, $500 for semester-long support, *. He's targeting your family again? Mrs. Rodriguez asked. Maria's a junior now, same situation I was in. Decent student, wants to go to college, but Peterson's class is destroying her GPA. Sarah's jaw tightened. Dad actually asked me if he should take out another loan. 23 years old, and my father thinks he needs to go into debt again because his daughters are too stupid to pass chemistry without paying off the teacher. The family dynamics were heartbreaking. Parents sacrificing everything because they believed their kids needed Peterson's help, while Peterson systematically created the academic problems he claimed to solve. How many other families know? I asked. That's the genius of his system, Sarah replied. Nobody talks about it because everyone thinks they're the only ones paying. Peterson makes each family feel like their kid is uniquely struggling, like the tutoring is embarrassing but necessary. She gestured to her paperwork. I only found out about other families when I started asking questions after Maria got targeted. Mrs. Rodriguez was taking notes frantically. This explains why the corruption stayed hidden so long. Peterson isolated each transaction, made families ashamed of needing help. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin, *emergency. Peterson called my house again. Mom's crying, *. I showed the message to Sarah, whose expression darkened. That's exactly how it started with us. Peterson calls expressing concern, parents panic thinking their kid's future is at stake, then suddenly paying thousands of dollars seems reasonable compared to losing college opportunities. We have to stop him before more families get manipulated, Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. Sarah nodded, gathering her evidence. I'm willing to go public with everything. Banking records, emails, even testimony about how the fraud affected my family relationships. She paused, looking directly at me. But I heard through parent networks that you've been getting threatened. Are you prepared for how ugly this could get? Before I could answer, my phone rang with Mom's contact. When I picked up, her voice was shaking. Honey, someone called the diner. Told my manager I've been spreading rumors about local families. They're making me unemployable. Sarah heard every word and her face went grim. It's already ugly. Question is whether we let Peterson keep destroying lives, or we destroy him first. Friday morning, I woke up to find our mailbox stuffed with college recruitment letters, dozens of them, all opened and then crudely resealed with clear tape. Stanford, Harvard, MIT, all the schools I'd dreamed of attending since freshman year. Someone had violated our mail, probably looking for evidence of my college plans so they could sabotage those too. Mom was standing in the kitchen holding her termination letter from the diner, her hands trembling as she read it for the 4th time. Effective immediately due to customer service concerns and unprofessional conduct, she whispered. 23 years of perfect reviews, and they fired me over the phone. I wanted to tell her everything, about Peterson's corruption, about why we were being targeted, about how this was all my fault for refusing to stay quiet. But watching her struggle to understand why her world was falling apart, I couldn't add that burden to her shoulders. Mom, this isn't about you. Someone's trying to. Trying to what? She interrupted, finally looking up from the letter. Honey, I need you to tell me what's really going on. The Blackwells didn't just randomly decide to destroy our family. What did you do? Before I could answer, my phone exploded with notifications. Text after text from numbers I didn't recognize, all containing variations of the same message. Drop the investigation or face the consequences. Your mom's unemployment is just the beginning. Smart students know when to quit. The coordination was terrifying. Peterson's network had mobilized overnight, turning their intimidation campaign into a full assault on my family's livelihood. Jesus Christ, Mom breathed, reading over my shoulder. Someone's threatening you. About what investigation? I finally broke down and told her everything. Peterson's grade manipulation, the video evidence, Mrs. Rodriguez's research, Sarah Martinez's bank records. I watched Mom's expression cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally, blazing anger. That son of a bitch has been stealing your future while I work double shifts to pay for college prep books, she said, her voice deadly quiet. And now his rich friends think they can intimidate my family into silence. Mom, they have serious power. Mrs. Blackwell basically runs this town. I don't care if she runs the entire state, Mom interrupted, standing up with more determination than I'd seen since Dad left. Nobody threatens my daughter and destroys her education. We're finishing this investigation, and we're doing it right. Her support meant everything, but it also terrified me. Now Peterson's retaliation would target both of us, and Mom didn't understand how vicious these people could be when their children's futures were at stake. My phone rang with Kevin's contact, and I answered to find him whispering frantically, Peterson just called an emergency meeting with all his tutoring families for tonight at 7. My mom got invited because we've been discussing arrangements. She's going to record the whole thing. Kevin, that's incredibly dangerous. My dad's restaurant got an anonymous health department complaint this morning, he continued. 3 violations they claimed to have found, including expired permits that were literally renewed last month. They're hitting every angle to force us into compliance. Through the phone, I heard Mrs. Chen in the background, her voice sharp with anger, 27 years building this business, and they file false reports because we won't pay their criminal teacher. We're going to that meeting, and we're getting evidence of everything. Kevin's family was reaching the same breaking point as mine. Peterson had pushed too hard, threatened too much, and now parents who'd been scared into silence were getting angry enough to fight back. 7 p.m. at Peterson's house, Kevin whispered. Mom's going to act like she's finally ready to pay him, but she's recording everything. If other families are there discussing payments, we'll have evidence of a criminal conspiracy, I finished. But as I hung up, a terrifying thought hit me. If Peterson was calling an emergency meeting of all his paying families, it meant he knew exactly how much trouble he was in. And desperate criminals made the most dangerous decisions. Tonight could expose everything, or destroy us completely. Friday at 6:45 p.m., I crouched behind the Miller family's hedge 3 houses down from Peterson's address, my phone connected to Kevin's via a group call that would let me hear everything happening inside the meeting. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the device steady. Testing audio, Kevin whispered from his mom's purse, where he'd hidden his phone with the recording app running. Can you hear me clearly? Crystal clear, I whispered back, watching cars pull into Peterson's driveway. Madison's BMW. Trevor's truck. 2 Mercedes sedans I recognized from school pickup. The Chen family wasn't the only one Peterson had summoned tonight. Mrs. Rodriguez was positioned across the street in her car, photographing license plates and documenting which families were attending Peterson's emergency meeting. We'd agreed that if things went wrong, she'd call 911 while I made sure Kevin's recording reached the authorities. At exactly 7 o'clock, Mrs. Chen walked up Peterson's front steps carrying an envelope that supposedly contained $1,500, actually Monopoly money wrapped around a real $20 bill, just in case Peterson counted it quickly. The plan was for her to act desperate enough to pay while drawing out other families to discuss their arrangements. Through Kevin's phone, I heard Peterson's voice welcoming Mrs. Chen into his living room. I'm so glad you reconsidered. Kevin's future is worth the investment, and you'll see immediate improvement in his performance. Before I commit to this, Mrs. Chen replied, her voice steadier than I'd expected, I want to understand exactly what other families have experienced. You mentioned the Martinez family found your services worthwhile. My heart pounded as Peterson's voice grew more confident. Absolutely. The Martinez family invested $2,500 in Trevor's academic success, and he's maintained honor roll status ever since. The Blackwell family has been even more committed. Their comprehensive package ensures Madison's valedictorian track through graduation. Mrs. Chen was brilliant, getting Peterson to name specific families and dollar amounts without seeming suspicious. Through the phone, I could hear multiple voices in the background, other parents discussing payment schedules and grade guarantees like they were buying insurance policies. Then I heard Mrs. Blackwell's unmistakable voice, the key is viewing this as an investment in your child's future. $3,000 now versus potentially losing $50,000 in scholarship opportunities. The math is simple. A man's voice I didn't recognize added, we've been working with Mr. Peterson for 2 years now. Our daughter went from C average to honor roll, got into Northwestern's engineering program. Worth every penny. Peterson was running a full sales pitch meeting, using satisfied customers to pressure new families into paying. The recording was capturing everything, specific amounts, duration of arrangements, even discussion of college admissions fraud. But then Peterson's voice carried a warning that made my blood freeze. Of course, discretion is essential for everyone's protection. There are people in this community who don't understand how competitive academics have become. Some individuals have been asking inappropriate questions about our academic support arrangements. What kind of questions? Mrs. Chen asked, playing innocent while my pulse skyrocketed. Nothing to worry about, Peterson replied smoothly. We've identified the source and taken appropriate steps to address their concerns. Sometimes struggling students blame others for their academic shortcomings rather than accepting help when it's offered. Mrs. Blackwell's laugh was cold as ice. That Rodriguez woman from the library has been asking entirely too many questions about student records. And that girl who's been stirring up trouble, some problems solve themselves when families understand the broader picture. They were talking about me. About Mrs. Rodriguez. Planning something that went beyond just threatening our family's income. Through Kevin's phone, I heard Peterson outlining a new plan. Moving forward, all arrangements need to be finalized quickly. There may be some administrative changes that require us to adjust our methods temporarily. Administrative changes. Peterson was planning to accelerate his operation before our investigation could expose him, which meant more families would get trapped in his fraud scheme. But as I listened to the meeting continue, documenting every incriminating word, I realized we'd finally gotten exactly what we needed, a room full of Peterson's clients discussing their criminal conspiracy in detail, with everything recorded clearly enough for authorities to understand the full scope of the corruption. The question was whether we could use this evidence before Peterson's administrative changes destroyed more families like mine. Saturday morning, I sat in the Riverside Police Department conference room watching Detective Sarah Kim spread Kevin's recordings across the table like a map to Peterson's downfall. The audio quality was perfect, every incriminating word crystal clear, every family name and dollar amount documented with devastating precision. This is a prosecutor's dream, Detective Kim said, pausing the recording at Peterson's voice discussing administrative changes. Conspiracy to commit fraud, bribery, grade manipulation affecting college admissions. We're looking at federal charges once the college angle gets involved. Mrs. Rodriguez sat beside me, her laptop displaying the spreadsheet she compiled over months, grade patterns, donation correlations, affected student outcomes. Sarah Martinez had driven down from State University with her family's banking records, creating an evidence trail that went back 5 years. How many students total? Detective Kim asked. At least 60 affected by grade manipulation, Mrs. Rodriguez replied. 30 who were artificially held back, 30 who bought their way to honor roll. Conservative estimate of $200,000 in fraudulent payments. $200,000. Peterson had built a criminal empire while parents like mine worked double shifts trying to afford legitimate college prep. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin, * Peterson just got pulled out of first period by police. It's happening, *. Through the conference room window, I could see patrol cars heading toward Riverside High. Detective Kim had coordinated simultaneous raids, Peterson's classroom, his home, and the school administration office where Mrs. Blackwell was meeting with other school board members. The families who paid him, I asked, what happens to them? Detective Kim's expression softened. Most will face minimal charges if they cooperate fully. Peterson was the architect, families like yours were victims of sophisticated manipulation. The wealthy parents who actively participated in the conspiracy will face more serious consequences. At 9:47 a.m., my phone exploded with notifications. Local news alerts, social media posts, text messages from classmates who'd seen Peterson led away in handcuffs. The story was breaking everywhere. Beloved teacher arrested in grade manipulation scandal, wealthy families bought honor roll status, academic fraud scheme destroyed students' futures. Mrs. Rodriguez showed me her phone, where the Riverside Community Facebook page was in complete meltdown. Parents demanding investigations into other teachers, students questioning their own grades, families admitting they'd been approached by Peterson but refused his services. But the most satisfying notification came at 10:15 a.m., an email from Riverside High's Emergency Administration Committee. Asterisk all students affected by confirmed grade manipulation in Mr. Peterson's classes will have their academic records reviewed and corrected immediately. Scholarship applications will be reopened for students whose GPAs were artificially suppressed. The district apologizes profusely for this violation of academic integrity and public trust. Asterisk. Kevin's recording had done more than expose Peterson, it had forced the school to acknowledge and repair the damage to every student he cheated. 2 weeks later, I sat in my car outside the diner where Mom had gotten her job back, staring at my corrected transcript. My real GPA, 3.87. High enough for State University's honor program, high enough for the academic scholarships I thought were impossible, high enough to prove that I'd earned my future despite Peterson's sabotage. Madison Blackwell had withdrawn from school entirely, her family facing federal fraud charges. Trevor Martinez was attending community college after Northwestern rescinded his acceptance. Peterson himself was looking at 5 years in federal prison. But the best part was Kevin's text from earlier that morning. Asterisk got into State's pre-med program with a full scholarship. Turns out we were actually good at chemistry, just not at paying bribes. Asterisk. I drove to school thinking about the 30 students whose futures Peterson had stolen, and the 30 who thought they bought theirs. In the end, the only thing that money couldn't purchase was the satisfaction of knowing you'd earned what you achieved. Peterson had taught us that lesson better than any chemistry equation ever could.